Hello there, everybody. I am Jeff. This is Tabletop Toolbox, and yes, I am back with an 84th episode of the weekly Ratchet. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to keep this going, but damn it, I'm here to do an episode, and it's going to be a good one. Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, welcome back to the weekly Ratchet. Here we are. I'm going to do my best to keep this going. And I will tell you, I've got the window open. It is an absolutely beautiful day here in Central Virginia in the middle of November. I think it's a low 70 degrees outside. It says it's 69, cloudy, overcast, windy, just beautiful. And so I want to be here. I want to share some gaming thoughts and ideas with you, but I definitely wanted to be able to just appreciate a little bit of this weather today. So if you hear some outside noises or the curtains move a little bit, you'll know what's going on. Hey folks, welcome back to the Ratchet. I will tell you, I got through my first week of work. I'm still gainfully employed, so I guess that's a good thing. I've got a couple games to chat about, thankfully, all because of RiverCon. We had our second, I guess it's the second biannual RiverCon, so he does two of those a year. This was the second one for the year. It's a Friday and Saturday event for the first event. Next year, I guess he's going to add a Sunday in at a different location. I don't know how that's going to work, but we'll cross that bridge later. I did not play any games this week until yesterday, Saturday. I went on Friday, but by Friday, the work thing had caught up to me. I was just tired. My eating schedule was off. I was just a little grumpy that day. And so I went, I kind of said hey to some friends, but I was like, look, I know I'm not good company. Then I'm going to remove myself from the equation and not make a bad gaming experience for someone else. So I kind of hung out for a little bit and then I just left. And I came in yesterday morning with some fresh sleep and some hot coffee and had a good day of playing some games. You're going to hear one game that you've heard about before and three new ones, which I think is really exciting. I don't have any new games that have come in this past weck. I haven't even thought about buying games. I don't have anything. I think there's a couple Kickstarter titles on the way, but nothing has quite delivered yet. But I will say this coming weekend, it's what, the 23rd and 24th, maybe 22nd, 23rd. I'm not sure specifically, is PAX Unplugged up in Philadelphia. I am going to that. I am taking the Friday off. I'll be going up there first thing in the morning Friday, and I am actually spending the night Friday into Saturday. Got a hotel up there, and I really, really, really want to play some games this time. I only got, I think, kind of like a game and a half in last year. There's a whole hot game section up on the second floor of that convention center that I didn't know about until kind of late last year, and so I couldn't really explore that. I'm gonna, make sure I get some of my shopping in first thing Friday, but then I'm gonna try and get my way upstairs and check out some new games. So if you're going to that and you like to play something, help me out, because I'd like to get some games played to chat about for 85. Okay, so let's all do our part, shall we? Anyways, gonna go ahead and get into question of the week. But first, of course, I want to say thank you to everyone who had comments and support and sort of weighed in on the last episode. I had to laugh. CR Poll made the comment about I had over 24 comments. Maybe I should announce that I'm quitting more often. Which I didn't announce that I was quitting. I just wasn't sure if there was going to be another episode or how frequently I can do this, and I still don't know. Last week was kind of this hybrid week of week and a half of online training and then a week and a half of being in the office. It's a stressful work environment. It's just a big open room, a bunch of people. It's very noisy. I can't focus. I don't have a work spot. I don't have a desk. I sat at a conference table for a little bit, and I'm hoping that I'll get into a routine and kind of get settled here soon. But it was tricky. It was a tricky week. And like I said, I was kind of grumpy by Friday. But again, I want to thank everyone for their support. There was a lot of new comments from, a lot of comments from new people. I have a couple of first-time posters to read off here, which I'm really excited about. And it was just great to see international viewers who commented, again, just people who were sort of coming in for the first time and say, hey, I really enjoyed the show. Hopefully you can still do it. If you can't, we understand. And it was so impactful to me to read those. I want you to know, I read every comment. I tried to respond to as many as I could. I hit the love button on a lot of them, but they all meant a lot to me. They really, really did. And I just want to thank you very much for your support, for you being here, and for listening to this dumbass in front of this camera. So with all that being said, let's get to your answers to question of the week. All right, question of the week. Last week, I asked you how you approach, how you handle, how you feel about confrontation or aggression in games. And the one big question I kind of asked was, not a lot of people really got into, was do you feel like that aggression and sort of the feelings that causes can get left at the table? I have a lot of thoughts on this. Even based on some experiences from gaming yesterday. Nothing significant, but as I mentioned, this kind of came out of the Eve War for New Eden game that Daniel and my wife played, and I played last week. And so I'll kind of come back to those. Now, I got a lot of answers, not surprising, with all the comments that came in last week. And you'll see a couple of themes come out of these. I didn't do a great job of kind of organizing them by theme. I kind of did this. Listen, I wrote this up at 12:30 this morning while my wife and I had some drinks, watching some TV, and just kind of enjoying each other's company because I hadn't seen her all week. But anyways, we'll kind of group these together as best as I can as I go. Anyways, up first is CR Poll, who said it would depend on a number of factors, such as if confrontation was baked into the game and why he's being attacked. That being ganged up on because he's in the lead feels like a weaker reaction than just each of the other players doing better themselves. He said that the only time he took it personally was, quote, when number 0 was violated. Don't be nasty about it, end quote. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't understand that last sentence, so feel free to clarify that. I even tried to Google it to see if that was a phrase that maybe I didn't understand. But you're absolutely right, and this is a little bit of a theme that we'll kind of see throughout this, is that it does depend on the game, and it does depend on why you're being attacked, and we'll see a couple other folks kind of mention that. In fact, speaking of which, Mark Roberts, a first-time poster, but a gentleman that I know locally here in the area, said, quote, attack me all you want if it's your best move to win, end quote. But if he's got no chance to win and you're attacking him because it's easy, he's not as keen on that. Yeah, if you're ganging up on someone because they're in the lead, well, is the game encouraging you to do that, or are you just doing that because you don't know how to do well yourself? And that's kind of the thing that you'll see sometimes is, well, look, I don't have a chance, so I'm just going to kind of keep hitting you because it's fun. Well, it's not fun. And you're showing yourself to be the weaker player by just trying to drag someone down. And really, if anything, you're king-making someone else instead of sort of almost respecting that player for doing a good job, right? Rentless, who I was happy to hear from, again, recounted a game of Arcs where he attacked another player early in the game, essentially knocking both of them out for the rest of the game. He felt bad about it, even though the other player didn't really seem to, and since then he tends to play more defensively than offensively. And that's kind of what I was getting into a little bit with this, is that, yeah, sometimes, okay, the game is a fighting game. Arcs is, in a lot of ways, kind of a fighting game. It's the same designer as Root and Pax Pamir. I think he did that one as well. I might be wrong on that. Sorry if I am wrong on that. But those are games that encourage a lot of this aggression. And so that is kind of the idea. But yeah, if you go and you hit someone and you just completely take them out of the game, yeah, maybe that's the idea of the game. But is everyone really going to enjoy that? And of course, that is where, back to some of the earlier comments already, is that it does depend on the game. If you're playing an aggression game, you kind of have to expect that you're going to see some of that. Agent83 said he typically avoids confrontational games in general, that he can take a bit of aggression from other players, but tends to feel bad when attacking others, which is why he leans towards multiplayer solitaire Euro-style games. And that's the thing, is talking about the style of games. Even those Euro-style games, worker placement games or drafting games, you can still have that where, I'm going to take this spot just that this person can't get to it, or I'm going to draft that card or token so that that player can't get it. I know you want this, so I'm going to take it from you. So you can still have that aggression. And that's one of those instances where I don't think it's baked into the game. And maybe you've got to kind of consider the fact that you're making that move to be aggressive, to be mean to someone. Is that really what you're all sitting there to participate in. And on that note, Teshra plays most of his games with his wife, and no, he says, they can't leave it on the table, which is why they mostly play cooperative games or lightly competitive games. He said him and his wife are very close. They don't get into fights, and they can't imagine being aggressive to other players, friends, or family as well. He said, quote, maybe that sounds weird to people, end quote. You know what? I don't think it does, because even as I kind of read that, I saw a lot of my wife and I in that same explanation. We don't get into fights. We haven't raised our voice with each other in over 20 years. Back when we were dating, had some early kind of, trying to iron things out and figure out who we were as a couple. But we have conversations. We work things out, and sort of the same things in games. And it's kind of funny because I was thinking about this as I was writing this comment into this document, that my wife she's kind of like that people-pleasing, almost like a pacifist kind of a person. She wants people to just enjoy themselves. Sometimes if she's playing a game and she's really getting it, she's kind of getting into it, she may say, look, I can't let you have this. I have to take this from you. And I'm like, yeah, I get it. Okay, I understand. But there are other times when she's kind of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just floundering around in this game. She knows I'm working on a review, or maybe I'm trying out some new strategy, and she'll just say, listen, what do you want? So I don't take it, because I don't know what I'm doing. So you just let me know what direction you want to go in, and I'll just kind of stay out of your way. Because, she just kind of wants everyone to have fun. She doesn't care if she wins or loses. Like I said, sometimes she gets into it. Sometimes we will get a little more involved into a game, especially if it's something we both know how to play fairly well. We kind of take the gloves off a little bit, like you said, lightly competitive, and that can tend to be quite a lot of fun. Simulation Chris, who I was also very happy to hear from again, said it depends on the game, probably, as in a 1 versus 1 game, you'd be more prepared to expect a bit of conflict. He said he tends to be less aggressive when multiple players are involved. And that's a really, really good point. I have reviewed a number of 1 versus 1 games. Kyperium was one. There was that Ironwood game, which is a 1 versus 1. A couple of games like, Star Realms. Star Trek Fleet Captains can be. It doesn't have to be aggressive, but that's also a 1 versus 1 game. But you're absolutely right. In those games, you're like, look, we are sitting down to play a head versus head conflict game. And if you're all on board for that, great. It is that type of game. And you can get that, of course, and if you're sitting down to play Twilight Imperium 4th edition, you just know that it's going to happen. But it might still be. It's going to just depend on the players around the table, again, as to just how you want to lay into that. Do you want to get super aggressive? Maybe you know someone at the table who's kind of like, oh, I wanted to try this out, but I don't know. Maybe don't go in and whoop the crap out of them and then make sure that they never want to play it again, right? And on that note, Viper86 suggested that people might need to be mindful of the overall environment and not keep a player from being able to play the game. He added that if you keep telling someone that it, quote, isn't personal, end quote, that it actually starts to feel like it is. That's a really, really good observation. And I've seen that in some instances where someone's saying, the game kind of wraps up and maybe they won, or maybe they kept someone from winning and they go, yeah, man, it's not personal, just a game. Yeah, but maybe you guys don't know each other very well. And they're walking away going, yeah, it's this game, you friggin' asshole, and I hate you and I don't ever want to play with you again. You got to be mindful of that. You really, really do. Yeah, maybe to you can leave it at the table. Maybe to you it's just a game. Maybe you don't care. But you made someone have this an overall bad experience, and maybe they just hate your guts now. You got to kind of take that into consideration. Jeremy Brooks said that he likes to make sure everyone is aware of potential confrontation early on and make sure folks are okay with it. Otherwise, they'll play something else. And so far, they haven't had any issues with folks taking it personally. And I've kind of, I've certainly had some experiences where, you kind of get done in a game and you're like, yeah, that was kind of brutal. I'm going to chalk it up to the game and maybe the fact that, we were still kind of feeling it out. Maybe we didn't know each other very well. I'll try to leave it at the table. But I could tell you that, for example, I won't play that game again. Or I know that I won't play those types of games with that person because you're just you're figuring that out as you go, right? Brian Bamhart, another first-time poster, said he tends to favor non-confrontational Euro games, but that when they do get into confrontational games, folks seem able to handle it pretty well and leave it at the table. And that's great. And I will certainly say that, if you've got an established group where you kind of all know each other and you're all playing those kind of games frequently, it becomes a lot easier to sort of to take it, to deal with it, laugh about it, laugh it off, walk away from it. I would say that I don't have a lot of those groups, especially on the confrontational side. I mean, I have a lot of people that I play with, but I know which ones tend to get aggressive. I know which ones don't. I will try to make sure that I'm playing either a Euro game with all of them or a confrontational game with only the confrontational people. But I also know that I'm not a big fan of that, so sometimes even I don't want to get into that situation. Red Panda Games said it tends to get worse at longer games, that aggression is a bit more tolerable if the game is fairly quick and chaotic, less so if he's spent hours building up something only to have another player tear it down. That is a fantastic observation, and I agree with you very, very much that I can stomach those games, even the random chaos games. In fact, we're going to chat about one of those here in a little bit. I'm okay with the random chaos if it's a 15, 20, 30-minute game. If it's a 2-3 hour experience and you're just sitting there just constantly kind of all over the place, or you're getting whacked constantly, or things are just changing constantly and you can't plan for anything, I agree. I do not really enjoy those experiences. Peter mentioned that it definitely depends on the players. He recounted an aggressive game they played where one player was running away with the score and everyone ganged up on them to keep them from winning. As a result, that player will likely never play 4X or aggressive games again. And he said, yes, he can let it go, but it's never fun to get crushed by other players. And I think that really sums a lot of this up, right? Again, if you might be okay with it, but someone else maybe just isn't. Now, going back to Jeremy Brooks' comment, let's communicate that up front. Let's make sure that we all kind of understand what we're getting into. And I think that goes for any game. I had someone join me for a game over the weekend, and I said, look, this is a complex, hard, heavy game. Are you okay with that? We're going to be here for a long time. I'm going to throw a lot of rules at you. Yeah. I understand completely. Good with it. Okay, great. And and they did well. But same thing when it comes to a conflict game. Make sure people are okay with it, and make sure they're being honest with themselves. Are you sure? Maybe we know each other. We're gonna kind of go after people. Maybe you don't know us that well. We want to make sure that everyone has a good time. Give them that chance to bow out. And if you are on that side, and you were the person sort of joining in, going, "Look, I don't think this is," then bow out. By all means, do yourself and everyone else at that table a favor and bow out, because you don't want people to feel bad because you end up getting upset when they kind of laid that out for you up front. So I think that's a really good idea. Wonderflonium said he's got some groups that love aggression in games and others that tend to avoid them. He said personally, he's got to be in the right mood to play an aggressive game. And I'll be honest with you, I think I already kind of pointed that out. I'm in the same boat. I've got to be in the mood for it. And sometimes I'm just like, look, I just want to sit and sort of think in my own little box and just play the game that I want to play. I don't want to have to sit there and duke it out or wait to get attacked on something. And I'll say that it's a challenge for me because I love the 4X genre, especially when it's in space. I love those kinds of games like Eve, War for New Eden. I think the lid's still around here somewhere. Yeah, it is. Where, you're picking your path. Like, okay, do I want to get into building a lot of things? Do I want to try and run missions? Do I want to try and do a lot of fighting? How do I want to play this game? And I love that. But if you've got someone at the table who's just content to just go around and kick everybody, it can be frustrating, and you never quite know what you're going to get into. I really respect the groups. I know a guy, I've talked about him a couple episodes ago, where I met a local gamer. We've never played anything together because he loves the highly interactive confrontational games. And I'm sitting there going, I don't think I ever want to play with you. But him and his friends do that all the time. He's got a group of people that he can always link up with. They play a lot of Twilight Imperium, and they just kind of know each other. And he can recount experiences where, he won because he just got really lucky, or he lost because he actually maybe tried to encourage a fight and no one took him up on it. And so I respect those folks who have those opportunities to sort of explore different systems of games, to play the same game in that sort of vein, right? The maybe aggressive, maybe not kind of games, and just see how many different ways they can get played. I think that's really cool. Again, I just don't really have that group. The other thing I will tend to say is that I feel like in some games, in some sort of war conflict kind of games, I don't feel like it works in the board game hobby. And it's one of those things where I've never been able to quite put the right words to it, but you're all playing this game and you're all trying to win, right? Someone's going to win, everyone else is going to lose. And how is that going to really happen? Is that going to happen because that player just crushes everyone else at the table? That's typically what we call an Ameritrash game, because it is that mindset where the winner is going to be the person who just destroys everyone else. Usually those kinds of games are going to have player elimination. You're going to get knocked out, and when you're out, you're just out. Risk. Axis and Allies, I'm assuming. I've never actually played that game. But, again, one person's just going to win by domination. And if you're all okay with that, and maybe I've met gamers who that's all they know. They don't know about Euro games. They don't know that there are games where you can kind of all get through the experience and then just see who did it best. It is those games that got me into the hobby. It is because of those Ameritrash style games that I grew up with. I mean, I recounted this in a Dice Tower review a couple of years ago. My first game of Risk was with my mom, and she made me cry. And I realized later, many, many, many years later, that it was actually an exercise that my child therapist had given her to make Jeff lose these games. Well, you could still make me lose a Euro game. That at least I get through the experience and, okay, you got more points than me. Oh, that's a bummer. I wish I did better. As opposed to, I'm your mother and I'm crushing you on the earth. And it's just one of those things where I grew up with that. And I think that's why I never got into gaming until I played Ticket to Ride and I saw what else a game could do. And I think that's why to this day, I just don't go back to those aggressive games. Yeah, I love the 4X genre, but I would love a non-aggressive 4X style game, which of course would be a 3X game. One of those X's is Extermination. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling. But yeah, I think it's a tough topic. And it all comes back to that Eve game where Daniel said, I want to be aggressive this game. I want to go out and fight. And I was like, all right. I mean, I may not love that, but let's just see what happens. And then he never did attack me. I brought out my big ship. I kind of played defensively. And he decided not to go in against me. And then when he did go into a fight, he rolled poorly and he lost, which was kind of funny. But he then later expressed that, well, he didn't enjoy it because he wanted to be aggressive, but he was afraid that if he played aggressively, we'd get upset. And I was like, well, look, the game's not really going to let you just fight every turn of the game. You're not going to be able to do that because if you do roll poorly, you're going to lose that fight. You're going to lose your ships. Now you can't fight. You're going to have to spend a couple of turns to rebuild, which gives us some chances to hopefully rebuild and be ready to meet you at the front lines again. And maybe that would make it okay. Maybe that kind of flow of the game between aggression and then periods of rebuild and aggression and rebuild could make that a neat experience. He advertised up front what he wanted to do. We kind of all said, okay, yeah, it's fine. And then he was upset that he didn't feel like he could do what he said he was going to do, but he could, and he just ended up choosing not to. And it was just kind of odd. We got into this conversation about, it's like, well, yeah, attack, fine. I mean, yeah, if every single turn you're attacking me, I might start to get pissed. But the other side of that was not attacking at all. You could have found that middle ground and we probably would have been okay with it. But we got into the conversation about, well, yeah, it's a game and we're friends, and so we don't want to be mean to each other, but we also understand that it's a game and we know each other fairly well enough that we could probably, we could weather it. We could play a game and be a little mean to each other, and we're not going to hate each other. We played Kyperium together. We actually got quite nasty in that game. It was a while back. But we're still friends, right? We didn't bring each other's mothers into that conversation. We just played a game together. So it was just an interesting conversation. I wanted to get your takes on it. That is it for Question of the Week. Quite a long one this week, but let's go ahead and get into some recently played games. All right, so every game you're going to hear about, I played yesterday, which is pretty good. It means it's all fairly fresh in my mind. It also means that I took all these pictures in kind of an auditorium. The lighting is not great. The coloring is going to be a little hard to get out of these photos. The shadows and all that's just going to be off. So hopefully I can make these pictures look good for you. I did get pictures of all of them. I probably didn't get the best photos in general because you're playing with people. Not all of them even knew me. And so I'm kind of taking pictures of stuff and they're looking at me like, what is this guy doing? And I'm not one who sits and goes, oh, this is going on my YouTube channel. You should check out my YouTube channel. I'm just not that kind of person. But anyways, the first game I will mention quickly is Speakeasy. I played another game of Speakeasy. And I'm going to talk about this quickly from the 4-player perspective. It was the first time I played this game at 4 players. And by the way, I left the box in the trunk of my car over at the house. And so I'm just going to throw an image up on the screen. But I played this with my good friend Matt Ball, a very, very competent gamer. I played it also with my friend Ricky, who is a pretty competent gamer. I've had a lot of good games with him. And then a third player, Justin, who we were all meeting for the first time. He recently moved into the area. I don't know if it was his first RiverCon or not, but seemed like a really cool guy. And like I mentioned, I kind of told him up front, this is a heavy game. You know what you're getting into. It's like, oh yeah, I'm good. And he did fine. I had a great game with the 4 of us. But it was the first time that I have really formally taught the game. I've played Speakeasy twice at 2 with Daniel. The first time we kind of learned it together. And then the second time we basically just sat down and played. We didn't really need to hit the rules up too much. Neither of us needed to teach. So I had to fully teach this. Now I will say that it took a good solid half hour to set up. And you'll see in these photos, we had a fairly big round table and we outgrew it. I had my player components in the tray sitting in the box and a chair next to me because there was just no room on the table for it. It is unbelievable how much room that game can take up. And I cannot get through the setup of this without the rulebook. There is so much to do. There's tons of these little tiny tokens that you're getting out and you're randomizing them. They give you a bag that you can kind of, randomly draw from. And even then, that didn't really make it a very easy experience. It was still a lot of setup. It took me a good hour to teach the game. I wanted to make sure that everyone really understood it. I did try to kind of throw out a couple suggestions like, make sure this doesn't catch you off guard. This might be a little harder to do. Don't forget that if you've got a building and there's a police officer in that district, your building doesn't exist unless you have a family member protecting it, that kind of a thing. So I tried to make sure that people knew some of the pitfalls of the game. I was told the teach was great, which made me really happy. I'm glad that, we really had very few questions. There's a couple little, what does that icon mean? That kind of stuff. Or, how exactly does this work? I don't remember. Not a big deal. And so we got into it eventually. It took us about 3.5 hours or so to play, not including a quick lunch break. And we had a good game. Now, I will say that every player still made some missteps. Matt lost, I think, a Speakeasy at one point to a mob war that he just forgot to strengthen himself up for. Justin lost a still, which produces the barrels of alcohol, and you only ever get one of those. And the base rules of the game is that when you lose something to a fight from this sort of AI neutral sort of characters, it's gone. It's out of the game. There is a variant in the game that says you can take that stuff back if you want to kind of play a more forgiving mode. But that's kind of a variant. And we opted to play the sort of more aggressive aspect. And I say aggressive, you cannot attack another player. And that was actually what Matt was saying. He really liked that about the game because, yeah, you're focused against the game. Your focus is, what's the game going to do to me? What do I need to be ready for? You don't have to worry about, well, crap, what are the other players around the table potentially going to do to me? That just doesn't exist. And it's actually kind of funny, and I won't get into this, but I was going to play Scarface 1920 yesterday morning. Only one person signed up for it. We both kind of agreed, yeah, let's not bother. But that is another, 1920s Prohibition era board game, but all the mafias are the other players, and so it is far more confrontational. I was going into that knowing that it was going to be an aggressive game, and I actually wasn't super bummed that we kind of canceled. I mean, I really do want to play it, but I was worried about doing that in that kind of environment where I may not know the people who sign up to play, and I did not want to, end up with a bad experience. So it was kind of interesting that, again, talking about the fact that, well, yeah, it's a confrontational game, but it's us versus the game. It's never us versus each other. Ricky also had a turn, I think, where he didn't lose any buildings, if I recall, but he did have to dip into his safe to pay his allied mob, sort of, again, a neutral character, to protect him. He didn't have enough cash in hand, so he had to spend it from his safe, which you spend at a 2-to-1 ratio. At the end of the game, it's just points, but if you need to use that money during the game, you have to spend 2 points as $1, essentially, in the game. I did not make any mistakes. I had a great game of this. I had a lot of fun with it. Now being my third play, the first time playing on a 4-player board, you flip the board over for 1 or 2 players and then 3 or 4 players. And so I was really interested to see and how these locations were going to get consumed. And I've talked about this, and it's really, really hard to explain on camera, but you have these 8 locations that you're going to. Each location has anywhere from, on the 4-player board, 2 or 3 different locations within that location. And each main location is going to maybe give you 1 or 2 common actions that you can do anywhere. But then there's also going to be 2 to 3 individual actions that only one player can trigger. And getting that efficiency, like, okay, I really need to do this and that. Well, if someone goes there, there is another location that you can go to. You basically swap your workers. You get to do the action like you had gone there, and when you move that player over to the other location, they get a little bonus, and they get to pick what they get. I did that in the very, very first turn of the game because I was 4th player, and then someone did it to me, and I got the little bonus. And that was really it. I was really surprised that swap action was not chosen more frequently, because you'll even see, I know I have a photo which is all these workers lined up across the board, and that was even before we got into the last turn of that round. So there could have been more workers out there, and I was surprised because I really thought that there was going to be a lot more of that, like, oh crap, you blocked me or something, and it wasn't even on purpose. I mean, that is a game where you are so focused on what you need to do that, okay, this is going to let me get it done, and someone goes, oh shit, and you're like, oh, sorry, man. I wasn't even thinking about you, because there's just so much going on. But like I said, I had a very, very solid game of this. I think my scores in Speakeasy so far have been like maybe 270 something. I don't remember my first score. Second was 350, and this time I hit 476. I was ecstatic. Matt did very well for his first play. He broke 300. Which I was still jealous of. I mean, he is a very competent gamer. I think Ricky had 230-something, and Justin had 170. I know he's played other Euro games. We chatted a little bit about it afterwards, and even he kind of said, I think a little bit in alignment with what Daniel feels about the game, which is that you get 11 turns in the whole game. That's it, 11 turns. And you have to be so efficient with those turns. You really can't afford to have one weak turn. Everything's got to be really carefully planned out. And so he felt that there was just too much to try and do in too little time. He didn't love the experience. He didn't hate it. He didn't have a bad time. No one really got bogged down with significant AP. I always kind of felt like the game was moving. It was a pretty solid experience at 4, and I would certainly play it again at 4. I think it works just fine at 2. Maybe at some point I'll get to play at 3. But I had a good time with Speakeasy. I really did. And I'm liking that game, and I'm bummed that Daniel didn't enjoy it that much, because I could see it being a game that we just kind of continue to come back to. I think it's more approachable than Voidfall, for example, which is another heavy game that we do like to get into at 2, because then your downtime is minimal. But yeah, kind of bummed that he didn't enjoy Speakeasy that much. After that, we went and played Gutenberg, and I did not do a great job. I meant to check this ahead of time to see who did Gutenberg. You know what? Let me do this. I'm sorry. I never do this during the Ratchet, but I want to be able to tell you who made this game. That is not how you spell Gutenberg. This is by... Publisher is Grana Games. I do remember that sitting on the box. It is designed by Katarzyna Glock and Wojciech Wisniewski. I know I didn't say that right. I apologize. Artist was Raphael Slop. Where is this game from? And it's published, or at least distributed here in the U.S. by Portal. And that was because I know I've seen this game before, but I had never really seen it. I'd never seen it played. I had not really heard a lot about it. And even when Ricky recommended we play it, I was like, I I know I heard of it. I couldn't tell you anything about it. It is a game about running a printing press. And it's actually, honestly, it's a very straightforward game. It is a order fulfillment game. You're going to have these orders I don't know if you're fulfilling newspapers, books. I think it's kind of a somewhat abstract idea of, again, you're fulfilling a printing order. And each order consists of 2 cards. One card is going to list a number of letters, and they're all vowels, A, E, I, O, U. But it may have anywhere from 2 to maybe 6 vowels on that card. And you have to have those types, the actual blocks that are used to print on paper. And I even thought it was kind of neat. It threw me off. It was a little trippy, but the vowels are printed on the cards correctly, like you can read them. But then you actually have these really nice wooden type blocks, and they're printed in reverse so that when it is pressed onto paper, it would then make it look correct. And I understood it. Thematically made perfect sense, but literally seeing the block and the card and they were reversed messed with my board gamer head. So you have a card of the types, and then you have another card which has ink colors, anywhere from 1 to 3. And then 2 or 3, I think I only ever saw maybe 2, what they call decorations. And the decorations are represented on a couple of tracks you have on your player board. There are 4 different types. I cannot remember what they're called, but there was one that was like a typeface that showed 2, like a capital A and a lowercase a. The other one showed kind of like 2 like chisels, which I don't know what would be used for. The other one showed a hide, which is for like bookbinding. And the other one showed like an inkwell with a little brush across it. And I don't remember what they're called. I don't. I remember the hide one was for bindings. That's all I remember. But you've got 4 different tracks, and they go from 0 up to, I think, level 6. 5 or 6. And you're advancing those tracks throughout the game. And some of those orders will say, well, have bindings at level 3. Have the typeface, the capital A, lowercase a, at a level 2. And then use these inks. So an order is a combination of those 2 cards. Have these types, have these inks, and have your decorations at this level to fully complete the order. Now, real quick, the second card, you have to spend the inks. You don't have to have the decorations, but if you do, you'll get an extra bonus, which is shown underneath those little symbols. And then there's kind of like a combined bonus. If you get both the inks and the decorations, you get an extra bonus as well. So obviously you're incentivized to try and get all this done. The inks you spend. The typed blocks you don't spend, you keep them after you fulfill the order. And the decorations you don't decrease, you just have to be at that level. However, you can fulfill multiple orders at the end of each round, but you have to have everything at that moment. So you cannot even use the rewards from fulfilling one order to then fulfill the other order, which is an interesting take on it. The whole game beyond that is a simple drafting mechanism. You've got 5 sort of rows of things on the main board. You have the orders, which are arranged into those 2 card types. You have a row of inks. There are a number of batches of ink based on the player count. So 3 batches of ink for 3 players, and each batch is 3 colors. The left one you get for free. The second one costs you $1. The third one costs you $2, and you have to purchase them in left to right. There's then another row of cards, which are those decorations. Each card will show 2 different decorations, or sometimes 2 of the same decoration. You'll simply draft that card. You'll move those tracks up of the corresponding types, or you can just discard the card to move up any one of your decorations 1 space. The next row is these gears. This is kind of the one gimmick of the game. You've got these cardboard gears that you're putting onto your player board. Each gear has a sort of a highlighted spot on the board. And so at the beginning of each round, you're going to turn the gears 1 space, and then you can, throughout that round, whenever you want, trigger the highlighted space on any of the gears to either get its benefit, to get some points, maybe get some money. It's a lot of iconography. You got to constantly kind of go and check the book. And there was even a little bit of ambiguity in the rules because we couldn't quite understand the way that it was worded in the one section. Said that you had to have, there were some of the gears that would give you a point reward for having a certain symbol on the order cards. Excuse me. I think by having the windows open, my allergies are getting to me. Anyways, and it seemed to imply that not only did you have to have the orders that showed these symbols, but you also had to be able to fulfill that requirement to score the points that were shown on the gear. Ricky and I kind of disagreed on how that worked, but we ended up not really ever triggering it, so it didn't really matter. But So you're going to draft those gears, you place the gears out. When you place them, you can kind of decide where they go. You can then later on use a gear action to reorganize the gears, or maybe even pick a gear up and turn it to another location and place it back down again, unless that gear has already been used, and then you can't do that. And then the last row on the board are these patrons. And each patron has a certain requirement. Again, if it is a letter type, you just have to have it. If it is a level of a decoration, you just have to have it. But if it shows ink, you have to spend that ink to simply buy that card. That card doesn't do anything for you except for it's worth 8 points at the end of the game. So you have these 5 rows of the board, and the way that you're triggering these drafting actions is that you have another little board in front of you with this 5 rows. I've just kind of punched out little slats. You get a number of cubes based on the current turn order. The first player gets 7 cubes, second player 8, third 9, fourth 10. You're going to, at the beginning of each round, put a screen around that board, and you're going to put cubes in those rows, and you're basically determining which actions you want to do. You have to have at least 1 cube in that row to trigger that action, and then how many cubes you've placed in there establishes the priority at which you will get to draft from that row of the main board. You then reveal all your screens. If you are tied with another player, if you both say have 3 cubes in a row, then it's resolved in turn order, and that's why lower players in turn order get some extra cubes to kind of make up for that. And so if you have the most cubes in the order, even if you're not the first player, you get to draw from one of those 2 order cards. You're then going to resolve the ink, you're going to resolve the decorations, you're going to resolve the gears, and you're going to resolve the patrons. And then at the end of that round, after you've done all that drafting, anything that gets left over gets wiped. You get a chance to fill all your orders, and again, they have to all be filled kind of like immediately. You gain any bonuses, points, money, etc. You can buy more of those types, the wooden type blocks, at any point during the round. It is a free action, but the cost of it is basically $1 more than the number of types you already have. So if you have 6 types, your 7th one will cost you 7. And there's a couple other free actions. Like I said, you can activate the spots of these gears throughout the round. They refresh at the end of the round before turning 1 space, etc. And honestly, again, I've literally taught you how to play. You could probably sit down now and pretty much just play the game, because once you sort of understood that, it was really, really simple. And I had a good game of this. I actually won this one. I was kind of surprised. I got 2 gears throughout the game, both of them on, I think, the 3rd round of the game, where you could activate it to get a number of points equal to the current round level. I had one of them that I got in round 2 and set it up to score in round 3, knowing that it would also score in round 6, the last round of the game. It's a 6-round game, and so I was going to get the maximum number of points. I then got another one of those gears in the same round, placed it in round 3 and activated it for 3 points, and then both of those gears gave me 6 points at the end of the game, which was kind of good because I was not able to get enough ink in the last round of the game to trigger my last 2 orders. I was only able to do 1 order. And then, as I did kind of briefly mention, you do get a unique character that you kind of draft at the beginning of the game, or you choose. You get like 2, you pick 1. Mine gave me 2 patrons that only I could satisfy. They're kind of like waiting for me to meet their needs and score the 8 points for each. And so in that last round, while I could not fulfill my last order, I was able to go ahead and satisfy the last patron that I had, scoring 16 points for the 2 of them. And so I played this with Ricky, beat him by a couple of points, not much. We were kind of neck and neck the whole game. And there was a 3rd player who, I'm going to kind of circle back to him in question of the week. I'll say that much. But I'm glad I played this. I would say that it's very, very brown. It's very much your sort of modern day, lifeless, colorless Euro game. I did like that drafting mechanism. There are certain times when you're like, oh, I really, really need that batch of ink and I really need that decorations card, but you're not going to be able to guarantee that you can get first pick of everything. So you've really got to be careful, or sort of just selective in what you're going to try and go for and what you're going to let slide by. That's actually what kind of bit me in the last round, was that I was hoping I'd be able to take an action with that last patron row of getting 2 extra ink. Just you can pick any 2 ink you want, and that would let me fulfill that last order, which was only going to give me like 2 more points. And someone else got to it before I did because I couldn't allocate enough cubes to it to then also make sure I could get the other things that I wanted. So this was neat. I'm glad I got to check this one out. Not a game I think I need to own, but I would definitely say that, if that order fulfillment genre is of interest to you, definitely a game worth checking out. Gutenberg. After that, a buddy of mine, Michael, I believe it's Doherty, who I've had here a couple times to play games, but I haven't seen him in quite a while. We haven't been able to link up our schedules. I'm trying to wake up my computer here. Invited me to sit down and play a game of Camel Up. Now, this was the original version of Camel Up by Z-Man Games. And this is really honestly, a very straightforward, simple racing game where you are sort of betting on 5 camels as they run around this very simple racetrack. The camels stack. And so whenever a camel would move, any camels that are stacked on top of it move as well. They almost get free movement. And then, of course, if you would move the camel on top of that stack, it just moves by itself. On your turn in this game, you have one of, I think, 4 different actions that you can take. You can choose to pull a die out of this very, very gimmicky temple-looking dice. It's not a dice tower. It's literally like a dice dispenser. And it has a die in it for each of the 5 camels and color matched. And so you'll tip it over, you click this little lever on the side, and the die falls out. And how it lands is how many spaces that camel will move. So you can do that on your turn, and if you do that, you take a little token that's worth a point or $1 at the end of that round. You can instead choose to put it has a title, I can't remember what it's called, but it's kind of like a chaos tile, and you put it on one of these spaces of the track. I think there's only maybe 17 spaces on the whole track. And any camel or camels that will land on that space will either go 1 space forward or 1 space back. You choose when you place that tile. And also, anytime 1 or more camels lands on it, you would get $1. You also have a hand of cards of each of the 5 camels. So you have just 5 cards in front of you, 1 for each color, and you can at any point during the game place one of those cards on 2 stacks on the main board. One is the camel that you think is going to win the overall game, and the other one is the camel that you think is going to come in last. Once you put a card down, that card is down. You can play more cards into that side. So if you later decide, I was wrong, I think it's going to be this camel, you can do it. But the card that was wrong will cost you $1 at the end of the game. And the last thing you can do on your turn is you can take a bet on the current leg of the race. There are 3 tiles for each of the 5 camels. And the top one is $5, the second one is $3, third one is $2, if I recall. And you just take the topmost tile. And if that camel becomes the winner of that leg, which means they're in the front after all 5 camels have moved, you will get the money of that tile. If they're in second place, you'll get $1. But if they're in any other place, you'll lose $1. That's the whole game. You're going to play multiple legs until a camel crosses the finish line. The game wins or ends immediately. And even if a whole stack crosses the finish line, it's whichever camel is on the top that wins the race. I didn't care for this at all. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. And I'll tell you why I didn't care for this. Because we played this at a 5-player game. It plays up to 8. I could not imagine playing this game at 8, and here's why. On your turn, because of those 4 actions, again, like I can kind of manipulate the race a little bit. I can make camels go forwards or back, but that is a completely random affair. You have no idea how that's going to play out because you have no idea when you've got these big stacks, how is that stack going to move? Is the bottom guy going to move first? Is the middle guy going to move first? Is the top guy going to move? And there's this idea that if a camel then comes backwards a space, it goes under all the camels that are already on that space. So you can literally have the camel that is on the top of a stack in the lead of the race go 1 space forward, that chaos tile kicks him 1 space back, and he immediately becomes the last place camel in the race, even though they're literally all still in the same space. You've just changed the order and completely changed the lineup for that race. If you decide to roll a die, I'm going to reveal a die and roll a die, and that guy moves, well, then all of a sudden the entire state of that race has changed. But that was your turn. And you can do a lot of deduction in the game to basically say, well, hey, these camels have already moved. There's now like a 90% chance that this camel is going to win the race, or at least win that leg. And then everyone else in turn order grabs the tiles, the betting tiles of that camel. And so you've advanced the race. You have actually helped people with the sort of deduction of who's going to win this leg or who's going to win the race. And by the time it gets back to you, every benefit that has been created by your turn has been absorbed by the other players. So you don't get to benefit at all from the fact that you've progressed the race. You're like, okay, well, hey, guess what? I have now revealed that green's going to win. You're welcome, you sons of bitches, because now I get nothing. Now I can't do anything. And there were times where it would come to me, all of the good drafting tiles have already been taken. All of the sort of betting tiles have been taken. The only thing I can do is go ahead and roll the final die and end the round. That's going to give me $1 at the end of the round. And then everyone else sits there and counts all their winnings because, you know, the guy next to me, he rolled the die. Everyone took all their bets. They're all going to make some money. And all I can do is just end the round. And I just did not enjoy that at all. I think this would actually be better at lower player counts when you can kind of all benefit from the common information at the table. And I think that even at higher player counts, it would get worse because, I mean, literally the round could end before it would ever even be your turn. That could happen at the higher player counts. On the flip side, I would say that it was a quick game. There were times that was certainly funny for the couple of people who maybe didn't make the best decisions. We had one player who put almost every single one of their cards on the win side. So they basically bet on 4 of the 5 camels were going to win the game. They did get the right camel. They were the only player who got the right camel. And as a result, while they lost, I think, $4 for their wrong guesses, they won $8 for the one correct guess, and they were the only person to guess. They didn't really guess it, just put all the cards there. So they ended up with a net $4 benefit. You start the game with $3. Let me mention that. And I think he had maybe $11 or $12. His girlfriend, maybe 7 or 8. I don't remember. The one gentleman, Greg, had a 7 or 8. I don't remember. My friend Mike had 6 or 7, and I had 5. You start with 3, so I made $2 in this entire game of betting on camels. This is one that's kind of always, I've known about it. I've always been curious about it. And I am glad I got to kind of check it off the list, but I have no need to ever play Camel Up again. The last game that I got to play, and this is one that I knew was going to be there because as someone who was kind of helping with a little bit of the organization of RiverCon for this event, I actually kind of helped contribute some play-to-win games to this. I had actually worked with Asmodee, and they donated some games to us for play-to-win, which was awesome. I'm really, really thankful to Asmodee for that. And then we got, at the last minute, we got a donation of games from Keymaster, and they provided a copy, actually 2 copies, of Parks 2nd Edition. I've had a couple members of the viewers of the show here have been suggesting that I check out this game. Parks is from Keymaster, and this is now the 2nd edition, and I've said all that already. The 1st edition came out many, many years ago. This was kickstarted, I want to say, back in 2017, maybe 2018, 2019, because I was living in South Carolina at the time. It was one of the first games I ever kickstarted. And the thing was then, Keymaster, linked up with a small, sort of a conglomeration of artists. I am blanking on their name right now. But this group of artists did prints, drawings, whatever it was, of national parks. And they had teamed up, had a license and everything together. And that group provided all of the art for all of the cards in this game of the national parks. And they were, in a single word, beautiful. They were some of the most fantastic illustrations I've ever seen in a board game. Each one a single kind of a tarot-sized card that would try to sum up everything about a national park in a single image. And like I said, they weren't photorealistic, but they were very authentic. And in fact, there is a couple out on the Board Game Revolution Facebook page that have tried to recreate photos of a lot of those parks on their travels and adventures. And it was really, really neat seeing the card with a photo that were very, very, very similar to each other. It was very, very impressive. However, Keymaster lost that license. That sort of expired. They wanted to come out with another edition of the game, but they were not going to try and get any of that art, sort of reused, and they came up with all new art for this game. I don't know who did the illustrations. I haven't looked that up. But the new version it's abstract is not the right word. It's just a lot more sparse. There's not as much attention to shading and detail. It's kind of it's a bit more simple, I guess, is maybe the best way to put it. I'm not a connoisseur of art, so I don't have all the right vocabulary. It just doesn't look as nice, is the best way to put it. However, they have revamped a lot of aspects of the game, relatively minor. So real quick, this is the game is you're moving across this path. In the original game, you kind of had different tiles that you would place out based on player count. Some tiles would never get used at lower player counts. In this game, it's just printed on the board. So you always had the same number of locations. You're going to put out a couple of these little wooden weather tokens. They're these very nice wooden, kind of a balsa wood that are dyed or inked or painted. They're not straight up painted because you can still kind of see the wood texture in these pieces. But anyways, you've got a couple different resources: trees, mountains, sun, and water. And then you have wild tokens, which are all individually cut to represent different wildlife. And they're really, really nice tokens. And those can be used as any resource. As you go along this path, you have these little workers. Now, in this new version, we were kind of laughing because it looks like a bent paperclip. We kept calling them clippies. You might be too young to know that reference. we would move our clippies along this track, and wherever you're one of your two hikers, you have two of them, wherever they land, you're going to take any wooden tokens that might be there. And then there's going to be a little tile at the top of each space. You're going to gain those resources as well. Or there may be an action. And that action can be buying a piece of gear, making an upgrade to your canteen. The canteen gets these little tokens on it. And when you would gain water, you may choose at that moment to put the water in your canteen. And if you do, you activate either of the tokens, both of the tokens that there are two there, on that canteen level. So that can get you some more resources. You can even get actions in your canteen. So when you place a water there, you can trigger an action. And that was a little more involved than what was in the previous game. If I remember, you would get canteen cards. They'd only give you one thing when you would place water there. So now you're actually getting a little bit more out of that canteen. And the gear cards, I kind of briefly mentioned those. Gear is just sort of an engine building, maybe a little bit of a rule breaking thing. You can have something that says, well, when you go to this space, you get this extra benefit. Or anytime that you would do this, you get to do something else as well. We had one player who actually was able to get gear for free, and they had quite a gear engine, but I'll circle back to that. As you're going through this game, as you're moving across these locations, getting gear, getting canteen, getting resources, you're eventually going to land on a parks space. There are 3 parks cards available on the main board, and you can also reserve parks using that parks action and put them on the one side of your player board, where then you and only you can fulfill them later. But when you're ready to visit any number of parks, you can use that parks action to visit a park. You simply spend the resources that are shown on the bottom of each park's card. You then move that card either from your reserve stack to your visited stack, or directly from the main board to your visited stack. Some of those parks, they're all going to give you points. Some of them may give you an immediate benefit, and it could be anything. Again, it could be taking another action, just getting some resources back, etc. And then there are a couple of little things that were added to this game. And in fact, the original game of Parks had 2 expansions. One of them I think I never played, but they're all included into this second edition. So one of them leaned a little heavier into those wild tokens, in that some of the parks would actually require you to spend a wild token. But of course, you could also just spend a wild token as any of the other 4 components. But if a card showed a wild token on it, an animal, kind of like a bison outline, you had to spend a wild token for that one piece. But then the other expansion added campsites. This is a optional module that you can play with in the second edition. There's going to be a number of camp boards on the main board. 3 of the actions specifically on the track that you're moving along has a little campsite token. And you can pick that up when you land on that space. You can either do what you would normally do there, or take the camp token, put it on a spot of the camp board, and take that bonus, which might sometimes be a little juicier than what you were going to get from that spot. And so we played with everything all in. There is also something called a passion card. You get 2 of these at the beginning of the game. You pick one to keep. And when you meet the conditions of the passion, which might be visit 2 parks with mountains that have like a mountain cost, or for me, it was take a picture. I just had to take a picture using a wild resource. So I'll mention this real quick. There's a couple spots along the board where you can take a picture, and you just spend any one resource and you take a little picture token. They're very, very small, and they're just worth a point each. The art on them doesn't mean anything, which is kind of a theme of the game. I'll come back to that. But if I wanted to use a wild token to take a picture, which generally could be seen as kind of a waste, I would complete this passion. And that passion then said, when you flip it over, you can either add it to the bottom of your player board as a gear upgrade, or you can spin it and it becomes an endgame scoring bonus. You get to choose at that moment which one you're going to take. Mine was that if I continued to use wild tokens to take pictures, I would take 2 pictures instead of 1. And I will try to remember to come back to that in a little bit. So that's the whole game. You're moving on this track. You're gaining resources. You're kind of triggering a bunch of different things. You're getting points. You're visiting parks. There's like an end game thing where whoever has... Oh, there's also... you're going to play 3 rounds. And at the end of each round, when all the players have reached the end of that trail, you've got these scoring cards that come out for the spring, summer, and fall, I think it was. And whoever has the most of something in the spring, the tile will obviously tell you. You're going to get a little bonus. In the summer, same thing. And then the final round, whoever has the most of whatever that tile asks for gets 3 extra bonus points. And there's a sort of a shutterbug goal. Whoever took the most pictures at the end of the game gets 4 points. Second most pictures gets 2 points. If you're playing, I think, at 3 or more players. I think it goes up to 5. Most of all of that was in the base game with a couple of small little tweaks. Or I should say the original game. And like I said, the canteen is a little more useful in the newer version. And then the gear, the biggest problem with the gear in the previous game was that it never refreshed. And so if you just didn't really see anything of use there, there was no way to ever clear that market. There's a ton of house rules out there for people kind of coming up with their own ways to do that. In this game, the oldest one just wipes off at the end of each season and they cycle through. But of course, with these passion cards, the one player, as I kind of briefly mentioned, he had a passion that let him, the first time, I think as soon as he bought his second piece of gear became free for him for the rest of the game. And he had a crap ton of them. It does say in the rulebook that each one can only be used once per turn, but he would, on many of his turns, he would go to a space, trigger that space, and then do like 5 things based on his gear cards. Because, well, this triggers that one, and that one triggers this one triggers that one over here, and then he gets all this stuff. I don't even know where to start with all this. So first of all, the thing that I've always kind of disliked about parks, this is one thing I said I'd come back to, was that the art was always just decoration. The parks cards in the first game were absolutely gorgeous. A couple of them in the new game look nice, but overall, the game just looks a lot more like that kind of modern day, sparse, almost minimalist. That's an art term I do know. Which is, I mean, again, like the fact that your guys just look like bent paper clips. Now, granted, in the original game, it was just a wooden meeple. But the board just looks more simple. The whole illustration of the whole game isn't as nice. Even the fact that these trays that held your resources are these kind of whitish plastic that kind of looks like a tree branch. But in the original game, they were actually brown and textured. It looked like a piece of tree that had all your components in it. And everything I would say about the new game looks worse than the original game. But even then, it doesn't really matter, because even in the original game, what I always got annoyed with was that the game takes up a decent amount of space. And so as you're playing, you would find yourself, every time you would visit a park, you would just arrange the cards from bottom to top. The new cards would just stack on top of the previous cards. So you could just keep track of the icons along the bottom for various endgame scoring things or whatever. The art on those cards never mattered. It was just this row of icons across the bottom. I do think in this new version they've added a little paragraph of text to some of these. We never read them. We never looked at them. And so it's got this whole theme of, oh, you're visiting these national parks and they're beautiful and you're hiking and whatever, but you never feel any of that. You're just farming for resources to try and fulfill orders. That's all it is. It's another order fulfillment game. And the only thing I'll say about the new game was that I really did like the fact that the canteens felt far more useful and the gear felt more useful. Again, I rarely ever bought gear in the previous game because I didn't see a lot of usefulness. It was a lot of those things where you might get a discount on a certain type of park. You didn't have to, you could pay one less sun or one less wood. And I just never really felt those would be useful because you're trying to get whatever you can get. And I should mention this, as you're moving across that trail, you're only allowed to go to an empty space except for basically once per round. If you go to a space where there are other hikers, even one of your own, you have a little campfire token and you flip it to its extinguished side and that will let you go there. But then you don't get to refresh that fire token until the end of the round. So you can only once per round go to a spot where another player is. And so it is not an idea of, okay, I need a mountain, I'm going to go get a mountain token. Okay, now I need a wood, I'm going to get a wood token. It's what can I get at this moment? What's going to give me the most resources right now? Maybe I can generate some sort of a conversion engine, maybe with my gear cards or other actions, but it is very much a what can I do on my turn? It's not something you can do a lot of pre-planning towards. But that's a little different with this new version because, again, with those passion cards, with the gear card, I felt like there was more engine generation than just gear tokens that maybe gave you little discounts or maybe gave you an extra resource when you went somewhere. And for example, I talked a little bit about the photos. The photos are just worth a point each, but my ability let me get extra photos, and then I got a gear token that said when you took a photo, you could roll a die, and the die would just give you basically extra resources, maybe an extra canteen. In fact, I completely filled my canteen. I've never done that before in the game. And then I had another gear token that said when I roll the die, I can take another picture. And so I would generate this engine. Toward the end of the game, I did as much as I possibly could, where I would take a picture. I would use a wild token if I could, so I could take two pictures. One of those would let me roll the die, and then rolling the die would let me take another picture. And so I was getting 3-4 points on almost every one of my turns. Yes, I was mowing through resources, but rolling the die would often give me resources back. And so I really had a nice little engine out of just 2 gear cards. And actually that let me win the game. I was staggered that I won this game because the player who had the free gear and the huge gear engine really didn't visit a lot of parks until the very end of the game, and they did not take a lot of pictures. I had something like 17 points in photos, and the endgame score was 38. My endgame score was 38. So almost half of my score just came from pictures. Plus, I got the 4-point bonus for taking the most pictures, and so it just kind of worked out very well for me. And like I said, I was not expecting that at all. We all figured that Jason was going to clobber us all with that big gear engine of his. I think that overall, I agree, and I apologize. I can't remember the one viewer who kept suggesting that I play this title. I am glad I got to play it. I will say that overall, the gameplay was a smidge better than the base game. And as I described it to my wife, everything felt like it had more purpose. The gear felt more useful. The canteen felt more useful. I really like the passion cards. That's new in this version of the game. I did like the campsite. I had bought that expansion for the original parks, and when I got rid of the game, it was still in shrink, so I never got to play it. But I like the artwork so much better. So much better of that previous game. The board was more vibrant. The tokens just looked more realistic. The artwork of the parks themselves was by a mile more attractive than the artwork of the current game. But it still doesn't mean anything. It's still just a resource gathering, order fulfillment game. And while I did enjoy the overall experience a little bit better, although I don't know if I did because I just didn't like the way the game looked, I still don't see any reason to collect this game. If I could get a deluxe edition of it for a very, very cheap cost, I might. It was nice to see like Shenandoah National Park, which is an hour and a half from here. We love going there. So it was nice to see some places that we knew. And that's always nice in any game. I think to kind of feel a connection with the game that you're playing is always nice. But it still just doesn't mean anything. And that was kind of ultimately a little bit of a letdown. Very glad I got to play it, though. Parks 2nd Edition from Keymaster Games. All right, that is it for recently played games. I think by then it was about 9 o'clock last night. I was pretty tired. I felt pretty good to get all those games in a single day of RiverCon, especially a long game like Speakeasy. So we called it a night, went home. Question of the week. So I'm going to circle back. As I mentioned, when we played Gutenberg, I'm not going to name anybody. I have no idea if this gentleman's going to watch this video, but we had a guy who joined us. We were just getting ready. We were just setting up the game, and he said, "Hey, can I join it?" Absolutely, yes. Love it when people do that. To step into, to just walk up to a table and say, "Hey, can I play with you?" Takes some guts, and I really respect folks who can do that. And we were glad to have him join. And then immediately he pulled out his phone, and he's playing a game on his phone while I'm trying to teach the game. So without any surprise whatsoever, the moment we go into the first turn, he goes, "Well, hang on a second. What does this do? How do I do this?" And it's like, buddy, we covered all this. We talked about all of this. You couldn't pay attention. And it's incredibly disrespectful to the other players to do that. Not only that, but even though we basically had to sit there and run through everything again, whenever it would come up, as we were in round 5 of a 6-round game, he was still asking how things worked that we had now already covered 2, 3, or 4 times. And I started to get flustered because while my friend Ricky knew how to play the game slightly, he had watched a video, he had never played it before, I took it upon myself to read the rule book real quickly and more or less kind of teach the game. He kind of backed me up. It worked well. And like I said earlier, it's not a complex game. It's a very, very simple game. But this other person made it so uncomfortable because we had to keep re-explaining things to him multiple times when it wasn't his turn. And that was a lot of simultaneous play, as I kind of mentioned. You're putting out cubes, you're kind of picking what actions you want to do. So there's a lot of simultaneous stuff. And when you're actually drafting things, it's very quick. You're first. What do you want? Perfect. Now you're up. What do you want? Okay, I'm left with this. That's what I get. Next row. What do you want? It's very, very quick. And he would constantly get back on his phone. I think he ordered food at some point. He got called to win a game, disappeared for several minutes, which is okay, except for that I was telling him that it was his turn, and he didn't even hear me because he was on his phone. The guy calls him on the overhead to go and win a game. Oh, he heard that. Up he went. And I got really flustered. I got really, really flustered. And at one point, he says, "Well, hang on. What do I do when I get this?" It's the same thing you did the last time, 3 times you asked me. And he goes, "Well, excuse me. I've never done this, but I never got one of these before." No, but you've asked 3 times. And the first time when I explained it to you, even without you asking, you were on your phone. And he got really upset with me, but I was already really upset with him. And so here's the question of the week. Have you had an instance where you had to confront someone who was making it a bad play experience for everyone at the table? And how did you kind of handle that situation? How would you recommend handling that situation? How do you approach a gamer who is dragging down the experience for everyone else at the table? Do you do that? Maybe you're uncomfortable doing that. I certainly wasn't comfortable doing it, but I do feel like at some point we have sort of a responsibility to try and get someone to change their method of thinking. Because if he did that to us, he's going to do that to other players. And I have played with this gentleman before. Last event, actually at RiverCon, we played an even easier game than Gutenberg, and it was the same thing. We had to keep telling him how things worked all throughout the game. We didn't even finish that game, and I was kind of glad we didn't. So that's maybe an interesting topic for question of the week next week. Folks, that is the end of episode number 84. I almost forgot which number we are on. Thank you again for all of your comments, all of your participation, all of your support through almost 2 years of the Weekly Ratchet. I'm going to do my best to keep this going. And until the next episode, have fun gaming. Cheers.